In 1999, Americans owed $478 billion on their credit cards. Today, that number has blown past $1.2 trillion.
Debt has become so easy to get, people are just spending without thinking about how they're going to have to repay that.
Has America lost its mind when it comes to debt?
100%. We've become a generation of people who need instant gratification. I've had people who we had to consider bankruptcy because they used money for a wedding. You're spending the money thinking everything's going to be okay, and then a month after the wedding, you look at where you are financially, and now all of a sudden you're not sure how to resolve the problem.
Would you say the credit card companies are encouraging this sort of behavior?
People are just probably less disciplined than we used to be back in the day. We understood that we had to repay those bills, and I think some people now don't understand that.
Our guest, debt advisor David Siegel, reveals the 3 ways to get out of debt. Number 1, the soft landing of lowering interest rates and consolidating that debt. Number 2, the danger zone of debt settlement. And finally, what many call the nuclear option, which is being a Jew, awesome. Managing personal finances, not so awesome. Welcome to Kosher Money. We're here with David Siegel, a debt advisor, someone who's been around the block, and I want to give you a quote. In 1999, Americans owed $478 billion on their credit cards. Today, that number has blown past $1.2 trillion. So, David, in just one generation, credit card debt hasn't just grown, it's absolutely exploded. We swipe every single day, and it's become one of the biggest financial burdens on our country, probably across the world. So let me get this straight. Has America lost its mind when it comes to debt?
I think part of that answer is the $700 billion was actually down a little bit because it was more. And then during COVID, it came down. So during COVID, we started to save, we started spending less. But yes, it's debt has become so easy to get. Everyone's thrust with card promotions. People want to get cards for trips. People are just spending without thinking about how they're going to have to repay that.
But how does that happen? We have mostly sensible people in America, or so I think. How do you go from being provided a great life by your parents, not having any debt, you turn 18 years old, and then you turn around at the age of 35, 45, and you're saddled with debt? What's that transition period?
Well, it doesn't happen all at once. I think people get a card and then they start using that card. It's easy to buy things with a card, a lot easier than with money. When you ring up a debt, you don't have to pay it all. You have to pay the minimum payment. You could have $1,000, $2,000 in debt, only costs you $20 a month. And people just don't really understand that they do have to pay that at some point. And that happens, and it continues, and it starts to snowball. And then you have some real expenses, and you just have to use the debt because it's your only way to purchase things and cover your costs. And that's when we start to run into some real problems.
So do you think it's a lack of education as the biggest reason as to why America has so much debt?
I think lack of education, and then I think we've become a generation of people who need instant gratification. So I want that, so I'm going to buy it. I can get it on Amazon, so I'm going to buy it. It's just become so easy you have your credit card on Amazon, 2 seconds you can buy something. I think it's education is an issue, which is something that at the OU we're been working on to help people learn about budgeting. But education and discipline. I think people are just probably less disciplined than we used to be back in the day. We understood that we had to repay those bills. And I think some people now don't understand that.
I've been paying, thank God, my credit card off, but I'll get emails from the credit card companies saying, hey, do you want to break it up into payments, right? Do you want more time to pay it off? It's almost like they're encouraging me. And I get it. It's their business. That's how they make a lot of money. But would you say the credit card companies are encouraging this sort of behavior? Like, are they at fault to educate the other way?
So you're right. They're in business. Their business is to make interest. While it's responsible on your part to buy something and pay, buy something and pay, buy something and pay, they're not a big fan of you because they're not making anything. They make 25, 30% interest when you have balances. So if you generate a $2,000 bill, they're happy that you pay the $20 minimum because they're generating interest. And that's also where a lot of people get stuck. They figure, oh, I only have to pay $20. But they don't realize that the interest is significantly growing. When you figure a 30% interest rate in 3 years, you've probably doubled your debt.
Would you say the cost of living, especially since COVID, it's gone up? Has that been a big reason as to why credit card balances have grown so dramatically?
I don't know that I could address that, probably to a certain extent, but I think it's more that at the end or during COVID, the government was throwing money at people and people were just started spending it. In the beginning, there was savings because you couldn't go on trips, you couldn't go out to dinner. But once we could, then people just started spending and they got different money from the government. And that's what that brought on inflation and that caused interest rates to go up. I think it's a lot has to do with the discipline that people just have got to the point where I want something, I need it, I'm going to buy it. Doesn't cost me. I'm not putting anything green down. I'm just using my card.
And we're going to get into the discipline, the budgeting, but I want to hit home on the shame around debt. So let's start with who you are, right? You're in the mortgage world, but you've realized you can help advise a ton of people as it relates to debt. Who are you advising? What types of people? What does that conversation look like?
So back in the day, I was an attorney. When I first I went to Cardoza and I came out and I practiced bankruptcy attorney, and then I shifted. Recently, seeing challenges that people are having, I have a relationship with the OU, and they have a program that has to do with helping people budget. I volunteer to help. So I've been speaking to a number of people who, not all of them have significant debt. They're just trying to learn how to budget. But many of them have built up debt. It could be just from regular expenses. It could be a wedding that they spent money on and now they have to deal with that. There's so many different categories of people from $7,000 in debt to $300,000 in debt. But it's an issue that they don't know how it happened and they don't know how to fix it.
Are they shameful? Are they realistic when they walk in? Are they living on another planet? What are the emotions you see from the people that walk in and have some sort of debt?
I'm not really seeing shame, but maybe that's also because we're trying to make sure they don't feel shamed.
Hmm.
I think there is a certain amount of embarrassment that they let themselves get into that situation, a little bit of shock and awe that they just don't know what to do, especially you have people who aren't really earning income, so that they don't even know how to budget and figure out how to pay it. So there's a number of different emotions, and obviously we want to try to help them. In many cases, there are some kinds of solutions. We want to try to walk them off of the ledge so
Hmm.
that they understand we're here, the community's here, the law is here, to try to help them. But to many, it's just they didn't understand how they got to that situation.
What sort of numbers are you seeing? What you mentioned 7,000, few 100,000.
Yeah, it's a range. Part of the suggestions we give is based on that number. And to somebody, $7,500 is a huge debt, and to someone else, I'd love to have $7,500 in debt. So we have to be, again, sensitive to the particular situation. Are they an income earner? Are they not an income earner? Can they figure out how to get out, or is the only way to get out bankruptcy? So these are the things that when I sit with someone, I'll try to gather their information and then make a suggestion.
So you've seen or sat with people with millions of dollars in debt?
I haven't seen millions. I think that's probably more on the business side.
Hmm.
I'm more of on the personal side. I have seen 400,000, but that's probably the limit of what I've seen.
And that 300, 400,000, those aren't people in their 20s, right?
No, like that's more 40s. It does take some time to build up like that. And we're not talking about car loans. We're not talking about mortgages. We're talking about basically unsecured loans, which would be credit cards. Maybe sometimes you get a personal loan, things of that sort.
Got it. Someone called me up great guy, has a great job. His wife works as well. And he says, I got to come clean. This was yesterday. He says, I got to come clean. Oh, I don't know what I'm going to hear. He says, I'm not doing so well financially. So he's like, I need help. So I said, before I direct you, tell me a little bit about what's going on. We went through it. So first of all, in his home, he has $1 million of equity. So if his home is worth 1.7, his mortgage is maybe $500,000 left. So certainly has equity there, has a 401k, and he was talking about this unsecured debt, credit card debt, and he had about $15,000 in credit card debt. Then maybe he had another $10,000 he owed to the IRS, but in total, it was $25,000. But to him, it felt like such a burden that
Mhm.
he was, as you say, embarrassed, or that maybe he's never had this before, where I was expecting somebody who got on the phone and you said, hey, does he have a net worth of $1 millionaire? I'd be like, no way, this man doesn't sound great. And I was trying to explain to him, but there was this emotion that for him, it was so much that for somebody else, they might look at that and say, hey, you're going to be in a good place in 3 months. We just have to restructure here.
Right. So that's what I would actually probably say in the first 3 minutes to help them understand, you know what, this is not a big problem. You've got a lot of equity in your home. Let's figure out what else you have. But we can definitely deal with this $15,000 and we can get it addressed. There are a lot of people who are much worse off than you. We can help you, and don't stress about it. And then we talk about it.
We spoke before this interview, and one of the first things you mentioned was budgeting, right? This fellow that I'm referring to, he said, I don't have a good handle on how much money's coming in, how much money's going out. So it could be that if he tightened up his spending and figured out a way to allocate more of the money he's making towards debt, he could be in a great place in 4 weeks, right? How important would you say is budgeting as one of the steps in fixing a situation?
So we're going to be talking about different ways to resolve debt. I would say that while we're not really talking about budgeting, from what I understand, budgeting is key in everything, because if we filed bankruptcy and wiped out your debt, you still now have to stay out of debt. You still have to figure out, how do I make sure that I don't get back into this problem? So everything that we talk about today revolves around the need to know how to budget. Some people have no income right now. So how do we budget? We have to figure out something else. Some people have limited income. So, okay, we have to cut back on the expenses. Goes back to this idea of instant gratification. Okay, so you can't go out to dinner as often as you want to. You can't go to Broadway shows. You have to sometimes make certain choices, even about summer camp or the wedding maybe has to be different. But budgeting is key. Everything else is important. Without budgeting, we'll just be right back where we are a year from now.
This fellow said something interesting to me in that he says, I might have to make a wedding coming up. I said, weddings these days, you can pull it off, $15,000, $25,000 total from both sides. He says, my spouse would never go for that. How much of what you see in terms of on the budgeting side as a solution, there being some sort of friction or barrier because the spouses have different expectations in lifestyle or cutting back?
First of all, I will say, when you get into these financial difficulties, very often, more often than you would see in a normal situation, there's marital issues. Marital creates marital problems. When you have money issues that people have different opinions on, or even not that they have different opinions on, but the stress of financial matters can hurt a marriage. So it's important to try to address those things in a sensitive way. I have seen that. I've also seen my daughter wants to have this kind of a wedding, and I have to do this for my daughter. I think I've seen that more than my spouse wants this kind of a wedding. The spouses go along with it because the daughter wants it, and they have to do that. That's what I've seen more.
By then it's too late to reset your child's expectations.
Or you try to, but you're going to hurt your retirement for a one-day party. I want to be sensitive to what we need to have for a wedding, but that's another thing when we talk about COVID.
Yeah.
you didn't have these weddings. That's probably one reason why there was an awful lot of saved money. That like a COVID wedding was sometimes very meaningful, but without all of that cost.
Interesting. Are people who are somewhat forced to make that larger wedding tapping into their retirement?
Very often.
Oh no.
Very often. Retirement. You just mentioned your friend.
Yeah.
He would be tapping into his home.
Right.
It's the only way to do it. He's going to have to get a home equity loan, or either that or into his retirement plan.
What they're essentially doing is pushing off their date of retirement, right? That just means they might have to work longer.
So that I've had people who we had to consider bankruptcy because they used money for a wedding, and we'll talk about it later. A retirement fund is protected in bankruptcy,
Right.
so you really don't want to use those funds. But yeah, definitely, because you don't think you're spending the money thinking everything's going to be okay, and then a month after the wedding, you look at where you are financially, and now all of a sudden you're not sure how to resolve the problem you're in. And yes, very often you do have to push off retirement.
Are people more likely to tap into retirement or put that wedding on a credit card?
I would say probably put it on a credit card, and then how do they? Well, also a credit card, you have to have a lot of access to. You mentioned 15, 20,000.
Yeah.
I think you're looking at 50,000 per person these days. But
Right.
so I don't know how often you have enough on the credit card. You're probably looking at a HELOC, from the
Yeah.
mortgage business. That's something that, I would discourage, but obviously you want to have the wedding. So the HELOC is one source. I would do a HELOC before we did retirement.
Home equity line of credit.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. A short break with a note from the best dressed folks in town, Twillory. More and more of you are scooping up their new arrivals with first-time deals and free shipping. Twillory's clothing is being spotted across the world, from New York to the Cosel. So, if you want to visit a retail location, I've got good news. They have one in Long Island and soon in, drumroll, Lakewood, New Jersey. I took a tour 2 weeks ago at their Cedarhurst, Long Island location and was quite impressed with their new polo designs, the texture. They're innovating. And they're very, very comfortable. And they're durable. So if you're in the market for a new fit, check out Twillory.com/kosher money. Links in the show notes. Use code CHAI20, CHAI20, for 20% off for a limited time. You can even scan the QR code on the screen if you're watching on a computer or a smart TV. That's Twillory.com/kosher money. And now let's talk about artificial intelligence. You've heard about it. AI, it's everywhere. Companies are building wildly cool applications, but there's also a lot of AI noise. What do businesses really know when it comes to AI, and what's your competition doing with it? What technology are organizations taking because of smart, software-based solutions? This all sounds good, but you don't know where to turn. So let me tell you about Bitbean. Yaakov and I went to their offices and saw them up close and personal. They sit with you, they guide you, they learn about your business, and they create a software-based solution at an affordable price. And because of AI, it's even more affordable than it used to be. So if you have a tech project, an app you want to build, a back-end system that needs to be customized and built for you because you're special, because your business is unique, I highly recommend taking a look at bitbean.com. Initiate a conversation. What you're going to get is premium software without the premium price. Even if it's not a good fit right now, I recommend checking out bitbean.com anyway, because you can see what is available, what other businesses have done, their case studies. Really cool. Scan the QR code on the screen or click on the link in the show notes. And now back to this week's episode. Okay, so let's go into the solutions. There are a few different solutions. You sit down with somebody, you're helping them budget, right? They used to be in a $5,000 deficit every month, but you've gotten them to break even. But still, they come to you, they have $36,000 in unsecured debt. Their credit cards over the last 11 years have accumulated $36,000 in debt. So I want to go through the solutions. Looks like there are 3 solutions, somewhat of a soft landing, the danger zone, and then more of a nuclear option. I like to think about it. So tell me about solution number 1 when it comes to somebody who has 7 credit cards, total of $36,000 in debt. What are you thinking?
Again, I think 36,000 is probably a number it's a good number to work with. The first category of solutions is lowering the interest rate. We're talking about someone who probably has not defaulted defaulted meaning not make the minimum payment. As long as you're making the minimum payment, you're fine. Your credit score probably is getting hit a little bit because maybe you have too much debt. So the credit agencies will look at that. But if you haven't defaulted, that's significant.
When you say you're fine, that still means their interest is growing every month because they're only paying the minimum.
Right. When I say you're fine, I mean for other reasons, like getting a new mortgage or another loan. It's a negative reflection once you default. It shows on your credit that you missed a payment.
You missed a payment, right?
So as long as you haven't missed payments, so that's good, and that we're assuming we're in that category right now.
Okay, but pay in full every month. I don't want that to be a people listening that you're giving the blessing of not paying the credit card in full if you're able to.
Right. It's always best to pay it all. This way, you're not paying the interest.
Right. Okay, good. Wanted to get that out of the way.
In my situation, most of these folks are making the minimum payment.
Got it.
So if they're calling me up, it's because they're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So the goal is to lower the interest rate. You're coming in with 7 credit cards, 15, 18, 25, 29%. And that alone is just choking you because you just see that number growing. Even if you're not buying anything, that number continues to grow. And even if you make the monthly minimum payment.
Spitball what that means in terms of a concrete number. If you have $36,000 on a credit card at 25% APR, so that's your annual percentage rate, how much more money are you paying every month if you're only making the minimum payments? It says here, David, if you're only making the minimum payments, your balance is growing by about $740 each month in interest charges. So at this rate, your $36,000 balance is effectively costing you nearly $9,000 a year in interest alone.
Right. And that's why key first step is to see if you can get that interest rate down.
Okay, so you want to lower their interest rate.
Right. So the goals of that goal is to lower the interest rate. So how do we do that? And there's probably 4 or 5 different methods. I'm going to start with the one that I think is the most effective and probably the first one to go to. And it's called a debt management program. It's the DMP. And what they'll do is, this is a company. They're typically set up as nonprofits. And they will look at your 7 credit cards. They will come back to you with a proposal where they'll say, we can get this one at 0%, this one at 2%, this one at 4%. You would have to close 6 of them. You get to keep 1. And the idea is they want to know that you are going to be responsible with your debt going forward. And that enables them to go to Chase and American Express and get them to agree to lower the interest rates to 0 or 2%. And I have people who are working with one company in particular, GreenPath, and they have 0 and 2%. And what they do is they structure it so that your debt is paid off over 5 years.
I'm a bank. This is a business. Why would I agree to a lower interest rate?
Because you're happy to get your principal back on someone that might be filing bankruptcy. That's essentially it. It's not so easy to chase people. You have to sue them. If you refuse to pay, it becomes a process. They'd rather not get involved in that process. They're working with GreenPath that presumably has done due diligence on you. They believe you are serious about repaying. And at this point, they're happy to get their money. Keep in mind, with other folks, they're getting 30%, 28%, 25%. So they're still making plenty of money. Mm-hmm. If they can make that money elsewhere and with you get their money back, they're satisfied with that.
If someone's put together, why would they use GreenPath and not call the banks up themselves?
You could call yourself. You could do both. I've had people. I say just call them yourself. GreenPath is not expensive. There is a fee, but it's a small fee. American Express is going to say yes to GreenPath a lot more easily than they will to you, because they know GreenPath has done their due diligence on you. And I've asked GreenPath if it's a negative, if Joe Smith calls and gets a no, they can still go to GreenPath. So, if you want, a lot of people don't even want to deal with that. It's very stressful, keep in mind, and you'd rather turn to a professional. And the DMPs don't charge a lot of money. So I would encourage someone to call a company like GreenPath in particular, and just give them your situation. There's no cost to find out what the proposal will be. They'll come back and say, here's what it'll be. Here's how much the fee is. There's a setup fee. I have this one that I'm speaking about, he had like a $30 setup fee and I think it's $10 a month or something like that. It's very minimal.
And what are they actively doing for you outside of just lowering the interest rate? Or that's what they do?
You pay them. So you make the payments to GreenPath,
Okay.
and GreenPath pays the bank.
And if someone stops paying GreenPath for whatever reason, what
Then
happens?
it's off, and your rate goes back to 18, 20%, 25%. So if you just stop, then you're however much you've paid is it's reduced, but they will likely say the deal is off and you owe us now $15,000, but the interest rate is 25%.
So I like that. Lowering the interest rate means I'm going to be paying less every month. It used to be 28, 29%.
Right.
And now I'm somewhere between 0% and 6% on the remaining 3 cards that I have.
Right.
I like that. Okay, what else?
Well, let me ask you this. Do you want to hear the negatives, or should I go into the other options? I guess that's
The negatives of what?
of the
lowering,
DMP. Everything has a pro and a con.
Does the DNP, this debt management plan, are there other levers to pull aside for the lowering the interest rate?
So here's the other issues.
Yeah.
With the DMP, they have to pay it off in 5 years, which means your payment might actually be higher because today you're making a minimum payment.
Okay.
Now you have to make a payment such that it gets paid off in 5 years.
Why is that? They want to,
That's
if they're
the
going to
law.
give you a law.
I believe that's the law, that these programs have to be structured to be done in 5 years.
Is that because they want you to be, the government wants you to be done with the debt?
I believe so.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm going a little bit beyond what I know exactly
Okay.
about it, but my understanding is it has to be 5 years. The other issue is we're closing out 6 credit cards, and you can't open new credit cards. So for the period of time you're in the program, the banks don't want you opening new credit cards, and if you do, again, they may kick you out of the program.
That to me is not an issue. That sounds like a blessing.
Right. So you have one card you can use for what, if you want to rent a car or whatever, you still have access to one card if you need it. But exactly. So, and that's why they do it. They want to know that you're serious about paying this bill. They don't want to have to be in 2 years coming back and going after you again.
So you can't open new credit cards. Does that mean you can't take out a mortgage and other things?
No, just credit cards.
Just credit cards.
Just
Okay.
credit cards.
So a debt manager, yeah, go ahead.
And they only do unsecured debt like credit cards. They're not involved with negotiating mortgages or car loans or things of that sort.
Got it. You also mentioned before unsecured debt includes personal loans. What's a personal loan?
So you go to a bank and you get a credit card. You also, and again, the banks are encouraging people to do this. You can walk in and say, hi, I'd like to get a personal loan. A personal loan is simply a loan, $20,000, $25,000, $10,000. It's not a credit card, but it's a loan to you. There's no collateral on it. That's why we call it a personal loan. So it's not like a home equity line. So a personal loan is just the bank lending David Siegel $25,000 and their terms. And that's an unsecured loan because the concept of unsecured versus secured is simply if a secured loan has some security on it, has the collateral. A mortgage is secured against your house. A car is secured against your car. A personal loan, it's just a personal liability.
Noted. Okay. So debt management plan, does that mean solely lowering the interest rate, or a debt management plan has other factors to it?
For the purposes of our discussion,
Yeah.
the debt management plan is only lowering the interest rate.
Okay.
These companies do other things. If you start getting into other issues, they can help with bankruptcy and they help with budgeting. But for our purposes, I'm directing folks to GreenPath. There's other companies purely for lowering the interest rate.
We didn't mention consolidation yet, did we?
We didn't mention consolidation. So this is not consolidation.
Consolidation means if you have 6 credit cards,
We turn it into one.
you turn it into one, right? I've always heard people say, oh, take all 6 credit cards, put it into this card, and you won't have to pay $1 over the next 18 months. What does that all mean?
That's another way to lower your interest rates. So, so another method would be get zero interest cards. So it's zero interest credit cards. You could take your $20,000 debt from this credit card, put it on a new one, and there's zero interest for a year. So that is one method to use. The negative to that is, first of all, I believe you have to pay 3% when you do that. also in 12 months or 18 months, whenever the 0% is gone, you're right back in the same boat. It's going to be 18, 20% or so.
Oh, that 3% is off the bat right away. You have
I
to
believe
pay.
so.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So it's not just a freebie.
There's always a catch, man.
So everything we talk about has pros and cons. Another method is a Gemach. So a lot of people are going to Gemach. So Gemach is a great thing. You get zero interest for a period of time. So the negative to the Gemach in relation to our discussion is you typically do need a cosigner. So now you're bringing somebody else into the picture. It's limited. It's probably just for a year, maybe 2 years. And again, now what happens a year from now? And the numbers tend to be more limited. So a Gemach might be the solution. Someone who walks in with a $7,500 debt, that might be a worthwhile solution for him. $200,000, Gemachs don't get involved in those kinds of numbers.
Noted. And for those that don't know, a Gemach is somewhat of a community fund where someone out of the goodness of their own heart will give you money at 0% so that you can get back on your feet.
Right. And there's some typically in different neighborhoods, you know, if you just Google probably or go to chat and say, I'm looking for a Gemach in Rockland County, it'll spit out different organizations that you can go to. It's typically not just one person, it's an organization and they have funds. And the concept is they use those funds to help you, but you pay them back. And and that's why they want to have cosigners, because if you can't pay it back, they will go after the cosigner for the money.
Is there a word of caution just because someone says they're a Gemach that someone should really do their due diligence to ensure that they're not getting hooked into some level of a business scheme, or generally Gemachs are kosher?
Anytime you're dealing with an organization that you don't know that well, you have to be aware. It's a lot better to be the one receiving the money and having to pay it back than the person who is lending the money. So you're receiving $10,000 from the Gemach. I don't know, make sure you look at the agreement so that they don't have some provision that says, oh, they can charge you 20% if you don't pay in the first month. But I'm less concerned with that because you're the one who's getting the money. In regards to lowering the interest rate, there's basically two other ways that I would look at. The first is just a family loan. Father, your son, you know, just a relative who has money and it's just sitting in the bank and you really need help, they might, and we have that often, where they'll just say, here's $20,000, pay me when you can. So the benefit, obviously, is you don't have the stress of having to pay a particular time. You may get a zero interest because they're not looking to earn interest. The negative, obviously, is you've just connected yourself financially to a family member. And then what happens when you can't pay them? And so that's an issue. And I have that right now with someone who probably will file bankruptcy. You have to discharge, and we'll get into that. You have to discharge the family loan, but then you can agree to repay it. But it just creates, you know, at the Rosh Hashanah meal, you're like, you know, it's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a possible solution depending on the family. So the last option, and you kind of brought it up. You mentioned your friend who said he's got $1 million in equity in the house. Presumably he doesn't have money in the bank because he's got $15,000 in credit bills. So what do you do when you have so much equity, but you can't afford your bills or you have credit card dues? Your credit cards, you're paying 18, 20, 25%. While if you get a home equity line, that's what I'm talking about. You get a home equity line. Right now it might be 7 or 8%. That's a lot better than paying 25%. So at times, if the DMP doesn't work, if the other options don't work, we would look at a home equity line, where if you have the ability to get the approval on the line, I would go that route. There are some negatives because what you've just done is you've taken an unsecured credit card for $36,000. You've turned it into a $36,000 secured debt. The negative of that is, chas v'shalom, down the road, you have to file bankruptcy. You could have wiped out that $36,000 credit card bill. You can't wipe out the $36,000 debt on the house because in bankruptcy, you can't discharge something that's secured without losing the security. So that's the negative. So that's a balance we have to take a look at to see if maybe none of the other options really work. I can't afford the DMP payment because it's just too much because, I don't have the income to cover the amount of what I got to pay. So a HELOC is a common method of getting the funds. You pay it off. Now you're paying 7%, 8% instead of the 25. One last thought on a HELOC. A HELOC typically, what it is a home equity line of credit. As opposed to a loan, it's a line of credit. You don't have to use it. And there's the old rule is banks are happy to give you money when you don't want it. You should take a HELOC if you can. Typically, if you go to certain banks, will charge you almost nothing to apply, and you don't have to use it. So you're not generating interest. You're not generating any cost. True, the negative of the HELOC is now you have a checkbook with 50 grand that you might blow on things that you shouldn't be spending. But the benefit of the HELOC is it's there. If you need it for something and you have to spend money in some fashion, rather than use a credit card, you've got the HELOC and the interest rate will be much less. So when you need the money and it's necessary, you have access to it. So one last comment in regards to lowering the interest. All of the strategies we just mentioned are not going to hurt your credit score. And in fact, they may help it. There could be a slight, anytime you pay off a credit card, your score drops just a little bit, but then it'll come back up. So one person I've spoken to, he told me once he did the DMP, his score went up. So it works nicely for your score because now you don't have that debt sitting on your credit card. Now we're going to talk about other methods where your score is going to get hurt. So that just wanted to mention that.
Got it. Okay, so a couple of points that come into my head as you're discussing the family loan and the HELOC. I could see the HELOC being a last solution for somebody that's not running a deficit from month to month, in that they want to pay their $36,000 in debt, they're breaking even every month, and they want to get rid of it. But if they're running a deficit every month and they're tapping it into their home equity, could be after 5-10 years, they're going to lose their home, meaning they're expecting to live in this home forever, not necessarily lose the home, but they're going to eat up all their equity in their home. So I'm assuming or hoping that people are recommending the home equity line of credit as a last resort. And also if they're not running a deficit, would you say that you agree, or it depends?
So again, I would say discipline is important. And I like to hope that I can educate someone to be disciplined. The home equity line is not a loan. It's a line. So you don't have to access it. If you have an emergency, where will you go? Will you go to their credit card and pay 30%? Will you go into your retirement plan because you have no other method of getting funds when you have $1 million of equity in your house? So to me, a home equity line, as long as you are disciplined,
right,
is okay because you're not tapping into the money.
But to me, when you go to a credit card, it creates this uncomfortability, this friction that you want to get away from it, or at least in my mind, more than the line of credit, which is a cushion. It's my money. I don't have to, it's something I can live with and tolerate. That's what's going on in my mind when you're mentioning it.
So it's all a balance of the person you're speaking with, and that's why I say it does come back to budgeting, because if we're resolving an issue and we're creating secured debt while you still can't even pay your bills, and we'll talk about it, whether bankruptcy is an option because you can actually have a lot of equity in your house and file bankruptcy. You could wipe out $200,000-$300,000 in debt and still have $300,000. You can't have $1 million. So that number is too much. There are limitations. But bankruptcy has a lot of protection. So budgeting is important. We need to know, okay, if we resolve this today, what's happening tomorrow? It's not separate. It has to be considered together. I believe that we need to treat people as adults, and having access to that money. You have $1 million in equity in your house. We have to plan for the future, but we also have to live. And are you really restricting your lifestyle because you refuse to tap into the money in your house? I have one situation where the woman has got $1 million in her investments, but she can't pay her bills. I said, well, then you're just going to have to take $50,000 out of your investments and pay your bills. That's what you have to do. We went to the budget, and there's just nowhere to cut. So you're going to have to tap into your investments. Your house is an investment. I hear what you're saying. I think it's important to understand and work on the budget, but we also need to be able to live. Don't take out the home equity line in order to spend on a more expensive wedding than otherwise you would be spending on. And that's where education and discipline comes into play. But sometimes as an advisor, if there's no other place to grab the money and you've got $1 million, you have $500,000 sitting in equity in your home, maybe you need to access that.
Right. That's what I wanted to hear, that it's more of a last resort. And I have to be so careful with people just because they might only hear a snippet of this and then say, oh, David said we go to home equity line of credit. I'm not touching my 401k. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Right.
You have also mentioned the family loan. And in your example, someone gave the $20,000 to a family member without an agreement. Would you say that's a mistake? And if it is a mistake, how do you structure some sort of documentation without going overboard and just hurting the relationship?
So anytime you're going to take money from someone, you risk hurting the relationship. As long as, everyone pays, any agreement anybody has, you go in with the intent that everything's going to work. And the problem is when it doesn't quite work. So first of all, it does make sense to have some agreement so everyone knows what we agreed to. Is there interest? Oh, I thought there was. I didn't think there was. A promissory note can be a one-page document. Again, you can go to chat. You can probably go to Google and say, get me a promissory note. It's very simple to get, and it simply says, David Siegel borrowed from Joe Siegel $20,000 on April 2nd and agreed to pay 5% interest per year. Principal is due in 1 year. So now we have an agreement. We at least know what we agreed, and hopefully I comply with that.
Hold on, 5% interest, that would be...
Okay, whatever.
Yeah. Okay, in this scenario, it's more of a business and...
Or maybe zero,
zero. Yeah. But like a structured payment plan of some sort. That's what you're saying.
Or whatever your agreement is. Again, you might, father's got $5 million in the bank. He's probably not going to want to, he may not want to charge his son interest. Or they may say, you know what, I was earning 3%. I'm happy to give it to you for 3%, but just I'd like to get what I was getting in the bank. But whatever they agree, I think what's important is come up with an agreement, try to abide by it. Because when you don't abide by it, your father's probably not going to come chasing you, but you're going to feel a little awkward when you don't make the payment. The agreement at least establishes exactly what your expectations are.
And for those at home, there is a rabbinical component as it relates to interest. Obviously, speak to your rabbis whenever dealing with any sort of interest on money, etc. We'll be right back to this week's episode, but first, a message from a new sponsor. This week's episode, in part, is brought to you by ZStander.com. What is that? It's the place for truly unique Judaica and home gifts. They've got over 200 absolutely beautiful items, from wine fountains to desk clocks to simanim plaques. They've got S-Rogue boxes, luggage racks, and more. One of their best sellers is the 5-dip Lazy Susan. It's built to fit standard deli containers. You just pop them in, pop them out, no mess, no fuss. And I'll tell you personally, I've got one of their stenders in my shul, and it looks and feels awesome. I've got quite a few of their products, but I buy a few at a time, and they are beautiful. The variety doesn't stop there. They have honey dishes for Rosh Hashanah. They have elegant wig stands. They have stylish bencher sets, high-end candlestick holders. They have these gorgeous napkin rings. They even have a 3-tiered serving cart, which we use in the sukkah. It is fantastic. And every item is designed to look sharp and last, whether it's on your dining table, in your guest room, or as a gift. And the real standout is they offer personalization. Almost everything can be engraved with your family name or a business logo, so it makes ZStander perfect for family milestones, corporate giving, you name it. Engraving is always included, and get this, orders over $150 ship free in the tri-state. But you gotta act quick. You can get 10% off your entire order with promo code KOSHER, KOSHER. Don't wait. Head to ZStander.com today. Link is in the show notes, and make your Yom Tov table, make your Shabbos table, make your next gift unforgettable. That's ZStander.com, promo code kosher. If you're watching on a smart TV, scan the QR code on your screen. Thank you. And lastly, a word from our friends at Colel Chabad. Did you know that because of Colel Chabad, over 47,000 families in Israel, let me say that again, 47,000 families in Israel have reliable access to nutritious food. That's literally hundreds of thousands of people being helped because of people like you. Parents should not have to skip meals so their children can eat. And Colel Chabad is on the front lines fighting for them. They've been around since 1788, hundreds and hundreds of years. That's older than me. Crazy, right? The percentage of every dollar donated that actually goes to help the poor and sick is very, very high. Why? Because Colel Chabad keeps administrative costs to a minimum. They avoid high rents, and they have an army of volunteers, but they can't do it alone. Please give what you can to our brothers and sisters in need in Israel. Visit kohelchabad.org/kosher money, scan the QR code, and give what you can. It could be $1, it could be $100,000, it could be 5 shekel. I don't even know what the exchange rate is there, but that's a little more than $1. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now back to the episode. Okay, cool. So we did a good job here laying out solution number 1, that soft landing of debt management plans, lowering interest rate, consolidation, family loans, HELOCs. Sounds good. Now, I want to talk about the danger zone. You said settlement. What is a settlement, and what do you like/dislike about that?
So the idea of a settlement is I owe $100,000. I looked into seeing if I could lower the interest rates, and I just can't make the payments. Even with 0%, I can't make the payments. What I might want to try to do, and what you can do, is typically go to the bank and say, listen, I can't make the payments. I'm not going to be able to make the payments. I'll offer you 50 cents on the dollar. And so the concept would be you pay $50,000 and they wipe out the rest of the debt. So now you're free and clear. You paid 50, you don't owe the 100 anymore, and you can move on with your life. That's the pretty picture of the settlement. The ugly side of the settlement is if you call up the bank when you're making your payments and say, I'd like to pay you 50 cents on the dollar, they'll say, you owe me 100,000. Maybe I'll take 90, but they won't take 50. So what's going to happen is, and this is, I'm less concerned about DMP programs than I am about consolidation programs, because what happens then is somebody will suggest to you, stop making your payments. And the fact is, in order to be successful, you have to stop making your payments. So I'm certainly not encouraging people to stop make their payments, but it won't work unless you stop making your payments. 4 months, 5 months, during that time, you're going to get phone calls every day from the creditor saying, you owe us money, you owe us money. And at the end of 5 months, you call them up and you say, you know what, I'll give you 50 cents on the dollar, and they might say yes. Okay, so what's happened now is you went through the 5 months, killed your credit score, but you're okay with that because you don't have anything special that you're planning on spending money on. Or maybe your credit score was already shot because you've been delinquent for a while. Somehow you have the $50,000 is one example, and you pay it, and that's done. Maybe you get a loan from your father, and you pay it off. Or what might have been happening if you signed up for one of these programs is you make a payment to them, a monthly payment to them. They don't make payments to the credit cards. They just accumulate the money. And then when there's enough, they'll call the credit card companies and try to make a payment. So the reasons I don't like settlements are, one, it's going to kill your credit score. So if you haven't killed your credit score yet, it will. So that's one negative.
How long is your credit score shot for?
Well, it's going to be impacted for years. Mm-hmm. If for some reason you turn around and then pay it all off, then it'll be hurt, but it'll get corrected as you continue to pay your payments. If you settle for less than what was owed, it will show in your credit settled for less than what was owed. And that's a real warning. I have somebody who owed $2,000 and he called and settled it for $1,200. He saved $800. He then called me up and wanted to get a mortgage. He can't get a mortgage for 2 years because banks will not give him a mortgage when it says settled for less than owed. Oh. So you have to be very careful with that. So that's a negative.
And that was just $800.
$800, right? And that's why I say the numbers are. If it was $100,000 and he got rid of 50, maybe that would be worth it to him. But this is it's an unfortunate problem, and we're trying to fix it. We're trying to say, we'll pay you all the money. Please get rid of that charge. And I'm not sure if we can.
And no one at home should have empathy for the credit card companies that they lost out on $50,000 in profit. I just want to make that clear when you hear that their business took a hit. Okay.
Right, and we'll talk about that as we get into bankruptcy also.
Okay.
Another negative is that, let's say I wiped out $50,000. Unlike in bankruptcy, where if you discharge a debt, it's tax-free, you could be liable for income tax on that $50,000. So if I discharge $50,000, I'm going to get a form from the bank that I have to now report the $50,000 as income.
IRS doesn't either know which form. They just don't worry about
now,
that.
there are exceptions to that. So sometimes you're not liable to it. Sometimes they don't even send the form out. But if you're going to get the $50,000 discharge, assume that that's going to be taxable.
That's if you can prove insolvency?
That's correct. So yes, if you can prove that you were insolvent, then it wouldn't be taxable.
I sound smart, but that's just what he told me on the pre-call.
Yes.
But he's smart in that he doesn't get into nuance where he thinks it's going to throw the
you need to speak to your attorney about that, or your accountant about it. Although some accountants don't even know about that issue. They just tell you you have to pay the tax. So those are the main negatives. The other negative of settlement is it's an expensive route to go, because if you do it on your own, fine. If you hire one of these companies, they're going to charge a lot more than typically a bankruptcy. So if you file bankruptcy, it's a set amount. If you hire one of these companies, the cost is going to be a percentage of what you're saving, and it could be 15, 20% of what you're saving. So the number, when you start to figure out I'm paying tax on it and I'm paying a fee on it. So I'm not a big fan of the settlement route.
Got it. So we are entering the territory of the nuclear option, but I do want to preface with a couple of things. That David does not like the danger zone of the settlement doesn't mean that he would rush, and I'm putting some words in your mouth and you'll tell me if they're correct. Doesn't mean you should rush towards bankruptcy, because obviously that soft landing of the debt settlement program is much more ideal than any of the other options of settlement or bankruptcy. So that's number one. Number two is...
I'm sorry, I'm going to stop you.
Okay, go ahead. That's what your job is.
I think you said the debt settlement program.
Yeah.
Debt management program, is that what you meant?
Oh, I apologize.
Right.
Yes, debt management program. There's
100%.
a lot of words here. Yes.
100%.
Okay. Yeah, so...
I think that's the very first route, is to at least see what you can get. Even before you look into family loans and Gemachs, I would say your first step is just see what you can get and then see if that works for you. So yes, debt management program is the route to start with.
Okay, cool. And I want to call bankruptcy the nuclear option, even though we're going to get into the nitty gritty of it for those that have no other options. And this is the route they have to take after speaking to an advisor, not just a rich uncle.
Right.
So by no means are we talking about bankruptcy casually. And we're going to go through the pros and cons, but just wanted to preface so that people don't take it overly lightly. Okay, I'm done. That's my, your turn, David.
So now I'll talk about bankruptcy.
Go for it.
The concept of bankruptcy is you get a clean slate. And when we talk about bankruptcy for our purposes, it's a Chapter 7, which is something that you start today. And over 6 months or so, you go through the process. And at the end of the 6 months, if you're successful, you've wiped out all of your unsecured debt. Most of your unsecured debt. There are certain unsecured debts that you can't discharge, specifically taxes and student debt. And we'll talk about student debt a little bit later. But typically, we're looking at what we discussed before: credit cards, personal loans, things of that sort. And it just gets wiped out. It's not taxable, like we discussed in the settlement. And the cost is typically much less because there's a process. You don't have the negotiations you have. You don't have that process you have with the settlement, where you have to put yourself through 6 months of not paying bills and getting phone calls from attorneys and then trying to settle and trying to negotiate. Bankruptcy is just by law. It's a program. You file. You have to go to court, which now is typically virtual. And then in 6 months, you get a discharge. What qualifies you for bankruptcy? So one of the reasons why I think bankruptcy is a I don't want to use the term as a good option because I agree that it's not something that you're striving for and trying to do right away, but it's meant to be a solution when you have no place else to turn. A big concept of bankruptcy is you don't lose everything. There's something called exemptions. So as I mentioned, if I have a house with equity, the law allows you to have a certain amount of equity. You have to continue to pay your mortgage. You can't not pay your mortgage. But in New York, the exemption is about $179,000. So with my wife, I could have almost $360,000 in equity in the home. And they'll say, okay, you can discharge everything else. You still have to pay your mortgage, but you can keep your house. If I have $1 million in equity in the house, then there's going to be a problem. They're going to say, well, you've got $600,000 of excess equity. We're going to use that to pay off your bills. But for that first 360, they will say, no, that's yours. You get to keep it. Don't worry about it. I could have $1 million in my retirement plan. Retirement plans are exempt. So a big thing to understand about that is I'm throwing a wedding. I have some real problems with a lot of credit card debt. You know what? I'm going to take $100,000 out of my retirement plan or a $100,000 HELOC, and I'm going to use that to pay off bills. And because I don't want to file bankruptcy. 3 months later, I realize I just can't manage. I got to pay off. I got to get rid of discharge these debts. I'm filing bankruptcy. I just wasted that $100,000 because I took it out of an exempt asset and I used it to pay a debt that I could have discharged. So it's important to, when you get to the point that you're thinking I have issues, it's good to speak to someone just to make sure before you do something that hurts you. A lot of people on day one say, I'm not filing bankruptcy. There's a stigma to it. It's not for me. I don't want to do it. Let's figure out how to make it work. And as much as someone like me or another bankruptcy attorney might say it's a mistake, sometimes people just don't listen. And what can you do? And then 6 months later, they come back and say, I guess I have to file. So that's just important to understand the exemptions.
Day one is a little early, you would say, right? You mean more middle of the road. You're weighing your options. Don't wait until the last minute.
Right.
Got it.
Right. Everything I say, I just want to, again, preface it.
Perfect.
I don't see bankruptcy as the ideal solution for anybody. I see it as a solution for those people who just are so deep into the problem that it gives them peace of mind. It gives them a clean slate. But sure, we should try to find other solutions.
What can people do legally if they're going to file for bankruptcy and do have $1 million of home equity? Can people legally sell their house and then put that money towards retirement? Is there anything legal to do so that you don't lose your life savings?
So there's something else. Let's say I have a bunch of money and I want to give it to somebody because I know I'm going to file bankruptcy. So that's fraud. So you can't do that. You have to be careful of that.
I wasn't suggesting fraud for the people at home, but I was talking about home equity because that essentially is not cash. So they'll force you to.
So there's two kinds of transfers. There's preferences where you give money to somebody. If you give money to a family member within a year, they'll say that's a preference within a year of filing. Let's say I file today, they'll look back at my payments to anyone. If I gave my son money 11 months ago, that comes back into the estate. If I gave it to anybody else, 90 days comes back into the estate. The idea is they don't want any creditors also. Like I could have paid a creditor in the last 90 days. They don't want creditor A getting preference over creditor B.
So legally, there is something to be done if you can push off bankruptcy and restructure yourself legally. That is kosher.
There are reasons to time your bankruptcy. And one other one is a different, which we'll get into in a minute, but there are reasons to time it. You certainly can time it. So again, there's certain things you can do which are okay, but the bankruptcy trustee might say, I view that as a fraudulent transfer, and then they may challenge the bankruptcy because of it. So it might be a reasonable thing to do, but if they say, I think you did that specifically in order to get assets out. So the two reasons to not do a bankruptcy, we discussed why you shouldn't do a bankruptcy. The two reasons why you can't do a bankruptcy are Chapter 7 is if you have too much equity in your house, because now you're going to lose your house. You may be willing to lose your house, But that's the concept of what we're looking for in Chapter 7 is you don't lose your house. You can have a certain amount of equity in your car. You can have a certain amount of furnishings. There's a whole list of exemptions. They're not looking to take everything away. If you have more than that, it doesn't mean necessarily that you lose it, but it just means you've got to come up with cash. Let's say you have a car worth $20,000 and the exemption is $5,000, then you got to come up with $15,000 to pay off your creditors. So it's not also necessarily just a no-go. If there's assets there, the trustee will say, give me those excess assets, and we use those to pay off your creditor. So if you have a $600,000 extra equity in your home and you owe $50,000, there's no reason to do this because they're going to take that money and pay off the creditor. So you could do that on your own with a HELOC. The other reason you cannot do a bankruptcy is if you have too much income. And I don't want to get into too much detail on it, but it's called the means test. And it basically says if you make $20,000 a month and your expenses are $10,000 a month, then you have $10,000 to pay your creditors. We want you to pay your creditors. And that forces you into what's called a Chapter 13, which is a reorganization, and you pay off your bills with whatever excess income you have.
That's not the worst problem to have in that you're making more money.
Okay, so let's say you have great income. You make $300,000. You just got a great job, let's say, but you owe $300,000 in debt. So you say, you know what? Before I start really accumulating money and having to pay this debt, let me just file bankruptcy today. And people did that. A lot of doctors did it, where all of a sudden they have all this debt and now they want to, before they get their really good job or they just got their good job. So you have a lot of income, you have a lot of debt. They don't want you being able to just wipe it out. So the means test was something that was new, that was created a number of years ago with the intent that let's look at the income. So let's talk about someone in the frum community. You have somebody who's got great income, but so much in expenses. And here's where the challenge can be. You pay $80,000 in tuition. The expenses have to be, so I'm getting a little bit into the weeds and means.
That's okay. People like that.
So typically, you send your kids to public school, you have regular expenses, whatever. They'll look at the numbers. There are approved expenses from the IRS. They'll look at that chart. They'll look at your income, and they'll say, okay, his income is less than his expenses. He can file. Passes the means test. Now you look at somebody from someone who is making $10,000 a month, but with tuition and with camp and everything, kosher food and everything else, his expenses are $13,000 a month. He's certainly not solvent. However, the IRS won't approve $60,000 in tuition. So the number is going to be different. So in the frum world, bankruptcy can be a little more challenging because of that means test. So these are just things to consider. So even if I feel that there's not much of a negative of bankruptcy over settlement, bankruptcy may not even be an option. So then settlement becomes an option. The issues that people have regarding the stigma. So I'd like to address that a little bit. Bankruptcy has more stigma than settlement, that's for sure. But you won't be able to get a mortgage right away, probably for at least 2 years with bankruptcy. You won't be able to get a mortgage for a settlement within 2 years. Mm-hmm. Your credit score is going to be really hurt with both. To a certain extent, bankruptcy might be easier to recover from because you can't file bankruptcy for another 7 years. Well, if I start to incur more debts, I'm already a proven risk to banks if I do debt settlement, and I could file bankruptcy next week. So there are differences. The bankruptcy stays on your record for 10 years. The settled payments are there for 7 years.
When you say record, is that if
it's on your credit score?
Their spouse, two spouses, it's on both of your records, or whoever's?
If I file, but my spouse does not, it's only on my record. Mm-hmm. And when I say your record, on your credit report. So when someone pulls your credit report, they'll see you filed bankruptcy within the last 10 years.
Is there a recommended way to navigate that where it's generally the practice for one spouse to file for bankruptcy? I mean, a lot of the Orthodox Jewish couples are managing all their finances in one.
I think it depends on two things. Your debts, are your debts separate? Mm-hmm. So I guess perhaps you're asking, should people have separate debts? I mean, maybe. On day one, we're not We're not looking to get into this kind of position. There might be other reasons why you have joint debts, but yeah, that probably can't hurt for other reasons as well. But also keep in mind, if you're filing a Chapter 7, if I file alone, I have a $179,000 exemption. If I'm filing with my spouse, I have twice that much.
Gotcha.
So you may want to be, but yes, there may be benefits either way. I think a lot of us have the stigma of bankruptcy versus settlement. You'll be able to get new credit. Typically what will happen is you'll start with a secured credit card where you put in $500 in a bank. They'll give you a credit card, not a debit card, for $500. So you're really just borrowing against your own money, but it's a credit card. And you use it. You use it responsibly. Something very important that I'll say again, it's important to use credit. That's what gets you a higher credit score, but you have to use it responsibly. So if there's two different people who come out of college and one has no credit cards and one has credit cards and uses it, that person's going to have a better credit score.
And a credit score is good because you're saying because that'll allow you to take out a mortgage, get a
car
better rate.
loan, right. Another thing, just an aside, is if you don't have any credit, you won't get a mortgage. Okay, so it's not even, I don't owe anybody any money. I understand we can't lend you money. We need to see a certain number of credit sources. Again, going back to, you have to be disciplined. You get money and just spend it. So that's an issue. But using credit responsibly helps build your credit. So with bankruptcy, you'll be able to get credit, not right away, but you build it. Same thing with settlement. But so those are the real differences. A bankruptcy attorney will probably charge $2,500, while settlement, depending on how much you're settling, it can be significantly more. And it can be a lot more stress because it's going to be a process.
There's an interesting nugget you told me about 7 years, a report that you wrote in law school.
When I was in law school, I just remember writing a report about the comparison of Shmittah to bankruptcy. So Shmittah, obviously, your debts are discharged in Shmittah, and it's interesting that it's a 7-year time frame. And bankruptcy, you can only file once every 7 years. So it's just interesting that the timing is there. We look back at a lot of our laws that our forefathers put on the books, and how much of it comes from Torah. Who knows? Maybe somebody was reading about Shmittah and said, let's put 7 years in for bankruptcy.
Got it. So what I'm learning, and we're nearing the end of this, so I do have a few more rapid fire questions, but what I'm learning is the general theme is don't put your head in the sand. Don't take the ostrich approach to money related problems. Would you say ignoring
100%. Banks want to hear from you. Don't ignore notices. Just like with your doctor, you don't want to ignore what's going on. You want to address it earlier rather than later.
But it's so easy to freeze up. That's the natural reaction for many. What do you recommend to somebody that just wants to turn this episode off and not hear from David Siegel ever again?
So here's a commercial for the OU. Contact the OU. They have this program, Living Smarter Jewish, and they will put you in touch with, there's I think 67 of us, different counselors and advisors, and we speak to people constantly about very simple. It's really focused on budgeting. But we also will get into these, there's different counselors who just do budgeting. There's different counselors who do more of this type of an issue. Reach out. There's no cost for that. And this way you get to speak to someone and talk to them about the whole picture. And then if you should do bankruptcy, they'll refer you to an attorney. It's important to have the one-on-one. This is the kind of a thing, what you do is great. You throw information out there. People can get that information. And I'm hoping this was helpful, but it needs to be personalized to the individual.
Noted. We didn't talk about medical debt and student debt, so I just want to touch on that. We did an entire episode with the late, great Marshall Allen, who went against the medical industry as it relates to finances and debt and bills. But where does medical debt fall into? That's unsecured debt, I imagine, and how do you recommend people think about that?
So medical debt is unsecured. I don't have any particular solutions for trying to resolve that. I know some people will just, call up the hospital or call up the doctor and say, can you waive it?
Always call, by the way. Never pay your first bill, Marshall Allen says. So
Yeah. Okay.
initiate that conversation. And student debt, are you seeing a lot of that?
Student debt is an interesting topic. Again, as I mentioned, student debt, for whatever reason, was determined it's not dischargeable. You can't discharge it unless there's undue hardship. And what has happened is generally there's no way to satisfy that requirement of undue hardship. And what we're seeing in some case law recently is there's a little bit more flexibility. And a lot of it is interpreted by the bankruptcy judge. So this judge might interpret it a little more leniently, another one might not. There's been a lot of change in the law recently, especially regarding these income repayment plans. And it's just the whole student loan story has become complicated. So we don't really know how bankruptcy courts might address the ability to in certain cases. I'll throw this out there: if somebody went to law school and for whatever reason can't get a job as a lawyer and is working as a low-income person and it's not going to change, that's kind of the category where people were able to discharge debt. So again, it's a one-on-one discussion. It's not as blanket as it used to be where there's no discharge. It's still complicated and a process, but it's evolving.
Got it. And you play in a band?
I play in a band, yeah. We're called Forever Young.
Forever Young?
Yes.
I like that. What instruments do you play?
My main instrument is guitar, and I'm a vocalist. I play around a little bit with a few other mandolin. I play a little harmonica.
You put on some concerts from time to time?
These are like just friend concert type of things. You know, we've done little things. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, we're looking for a bass player in case anybody's interested.
Okay, well, how should the bass player contact you, or if people have questions about the episode?
Okay, so you could reach out to me at DJS.Siegel. My name is spelled Siegel, and that's DJS for David James Siegel.
That's a strong name.
Well, thank you.
James after James Taylor?
I don't think so.
But you were listening to him, and that's how you got into this, right?
I did go to a James Taylor concert, and I looked at it, and I said, hey, I could do that. And so we staged a little concert in my backyard.
Love that.
Had 3 bands play. It was a lot of fun.
Love that. David, I cannot thank you enough. This was fantastic. There's a lot of information here. I'm sure we can get into the nitty-gritty of it, but I do hope and I do believe this episode can help a lot of people just get a better understanding on their 75-minute drive from point A to point B and hopefully guide them in the right direction. I know Living Smarter Jewish is doing some great things. So if you'd like to set up for a coach or advisor, it's free, info@livingsmarterjewish.org. And I cannot thank you enough for coming in today, for sharing this information, for being so giving, helping the world, and you should be blessed.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the work that you do, and it was a pleasure to be here. And ketiva v'chatima tova to everybody out there.
Same to you. Another terrific and very helpful episode is in the books. Let's pull out a few lessons that every American, every person in the world can use from this conversation with David Siegel. Thank you, David. Here we go. Don't ignore your debt. The longer you wait, the fewer options you're going to have. Number 2, budgeting is not optional. You should know this by now. Knowing where your money is going is the first step towards financial freedom. And lastly, instant gratification costs more than you think. Every swipe of a card today can turn into years of payments tomorrow. So please be careful. A big thank you to our sponsors who make these episodes possible. We can't just do this without paying our editors and our team. Twillory is redefining what men's clothing should feel and look like in 2025, 2026, 2027. Whenever you're listening to this, check out their retail stores as well. Twillory.com, you see the promo code. Also, Bitbean, one of my favorite advertisers, your custom software solution with incredible talent at a fraction of the price it used to be. If you're a logistics company, if you're a medical company, if you're a mid-sized to larger company and you need software help, turn to Bitbean. Link is in the show notes, as is all the links, there you go, of our sponsors. And the new kid on the block, ZStander.com. They've got gorgeous Judaica gifts for your home, your friends, or your business associates. Use the promo code KOSHER and you'll get 10% off for a limited time. And to a friend of Colel Chabad who supports this podcast and Colel Chabad, who encourages you to help the vulnerable in Israel with a much needed donation. People across Eretz Yisrael, across Israel, need our help. Whether you're in Israel or across the world, please give whatever you can. Link is in the show notes. Thank you so much, so much for supporting our sponsors so we can keep bringing you more wonderful Kosher Money episodes. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That's how you'll find out about new episodes. And now for the fun part. If you want a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card, comment on this video on YouTube using either the word debt or credit card. Debt or credit card. We'll pick one of you to win that $100 Amazon gift card. Congratulations to YouTube user Ziffel22. Ziffel22, well, you just won a $100 Amazon gift card from our David Lichtenstein episode, which has over 135,000 views just on YouTube. Incredible stuff. And here's your money message for the week. Money is a tool, not a trophy. So use it with good intention, and it will serve you well. I'll see you next time.
Living L'chaim.